Hi folks, this is a Kids Church video for upper elementary school kids for the month of January 2021. First of all, it's a new year. Can you believe it? Also, we started making these Kids Church videos in April of 2020. So 3 more months to go and there will be a whole year of Kids Church videos. So if you have stuck around and kept watching these videos all year, thank you so much. And gosh, I feel like I should get you a prize or something. If you can send me an email, or if your parents can text me a photo where you write down a little bit about each of the Kids Church videos for your age group and which one is your favorite, then I will get a prize for you. It'll be a gift card, probably to BookBug. Okay? You guys are awesome. This month's story is one of my favorites from the Bible because it's a story where Jesus is such a normal person. Sometimes we think that Jesus, because Jesus is somehow fully human and fully God, we think of Jesus as being like this special superhuman person who is hard to relate to sometimes. But in this story, Jesus is like the most normal 12-year-old ever. You ready to hear it? Okay. So, this story is one of the only stories we have that happens between Jesus' birth and Jesus being an adult. It's one of the only stories we have of Jesus as a kid. But we know that when Jesus was about 11 or 12, his family went on a big trip to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the big capital city. It's where the temple was. But they didn't live in Jerusalem. They lived in Nazareth. So it was a couple-day trip to walk to Jerusalem. And they did this with a bunch of other people. It was a pilgrimage where they were going to Jerusalem specifically to go to the temple for a big holiday. And they took this big trip. They went to the temple. They did all the religious things that they were expected to do during that festival. And then they packed things up and started heading home again. But a couple days into their trip home, Jesus' parents noticed that Jesus was not with the big group that they were traveling with. Now, first of all, this must have been a big group of people if it took 2 days for Jesus' parents to notice he was missing, right? Gosh, have you ever gotten separated from your parents? What did it feel like? How long did it take your parents to notice that you were missing? I wonder how Jesus' parents felt. Probably scared. They didn't know if Jesus went missing partway along the trip or if he was still back in Jerusalem. They didn't know if maybe people along the side of the road had kidnapped him from their group, or if he had just sat down because he was tired and everybody moved on and he didn't know how to catch up to everybody. If that happened to me with my 12-year-old, I would be really scared. So Jesus' parents start tracing their steps back to Jerusalem. And I imagine that they were looking along the roadside and asking other travelers if they saw Jesus and trying to describe him accurately so that people would be able to help them find him. They make it all the way back to Jerusalem, having traced all of their steps to the last place where they saw him, which was in the temple. And when they got to the temple, Jesus was there. And Jesus was not particularly upset that he'd been separated from his parents for 3 days. He was talking happily with the other teachers of the law, the religious leaders who were at the temple. And all of those adults were really impressed because apparently Jesus had some pretty interesting things to say. But Jesus' mother, Mary, was really upset. And she told Jesus, why? Why did you do this to us? You stayed behind here and you didn't tell anybody, and we've been worried sick for days. We thought you were dead. How could you do this to us? And Jesus' response was, well, where would you expect me to be? But here, in my Father's house. That sounds like a really 12-year-old response to me. I think a lot of parents have had 12-year-olds who have wanted to have independence, wanted to do things their own way, haven't necessarily asked permission, and when their parents get upset with them, still aren't willing to admit that they did anything wrong. I wonder, if you're in upper elementary school, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, you might be starting to itch for more independence. What that looks like might be different than what it looked like for Jesus. You might be asking your parents for a phone, or for social media accounts, or for the ability to walk to the store by yourself if you live close to a store. And my guess is that when you first start asking for those things, the answers that you get from your parents are disappointing and frustrating. Because usually we start asking for independence and wanting independence before our parents are confident that we can handle that independence. There's a lot of learning to do to be able to be a responsible, independent person. But growing toward that independence is a part of growing up. And I love that we have a story of Jesus wanting more independence than his parents were ready to give him. Because that just makes Jesus seem like a really normal kid to me. I also want you to start thinking about what this shows us about Jesus' understanding of his faith and his relationship with God. His parents took him along on a festival that mattered to them. But it seems like Jesus was looking for something a little bit different out of that trip. Jesus stayed in that temple because he wanted to engage with God and with these religious leaders who taught about God. And he wanted to ask questions that there wasn't time to ask. He wanted to be in that place in a different way and at different times and for different reasons than his parents. And that might happen for you too. When you're a kid, your parents bring you to church because it matters to them. But as you get older, you get to think about what this tradition means, what it means for you, what's valuable to you about church. And you might find that you want to talk about God or learn about God or be in relationship with God in ways that are different than your parents. And we have space in our church for kids to begin to explore that. That's a big part of why we have catechism classes for kids who are in middle school and high school, is so that they can start thinking about and exploring what it means to follow Jesus in their own way, which might be different from their parents. I wonder what places in your life you want independence. I wonder how you can have a conversation with your parents about those things. I wonder what happens in your family if you launch out and do something without asking for permission first. Do you get in trouble? What sort of consequences do you experience? Do you lose your parents' trust? Do you lose responsibilities? I imagine that Jesus experienced some consequences. I bet when he did start traveling back home with his parents, they didn't let him out of their sight. They probably kept him a lot closer than they had kept him on the trip to Jerusalem because he had proven untrustworthy. He'd done something without asking for their permission first. And Jesus still grew up into an amazing human being who changed the world. So, having those struggles with our parents when we're kids, I think that's a normal thing. And I think that as you have conversations with your parents, as you earn their trust to gain more independence and more responsibilities, I think that you're going to grow up into a person who changes the world too. I'm pretty excited to get to watch it happen. So, I hope that you are inspired by this story, maybe encouraged to know that Jesus has felt some of the same things that you might feel. And I hope that you have some conversations with your family about this. That struggle between asking for permission and trying to take responsibility for your own life. That's a really normal part of growing up. It's good to talk about it with your parents. So, know that I am thinking of you. Know that I am excited about all the ways that you are growing up, even though I don't get to see it. Probably the next time I see you in person, I'm going to be amazed at how much taller you are. And I'm just really glad. I'm glad that you're growing up in our church, that I get to see it happen, and I'm looking forward to who you're growing into. Take care.